Hello everyone and welcome back to Odyssey Recaps, just the Tea edition. Just a reminder that if you want a little more in-depth look at the chapters, feel free to head over to my below the surface recaps, but for now, let's get started. So today we are recapping book 9 of the Odyssey, titled by Emily Wilson as A Pirate in a Shepherd's Cave. Now, I'm gonna need you guys to buckle up because this chapter is a doozy, to say the least. I'm going to start with a little trigger warning. This chapter is gross, gruesome, and generally has the vibe of like a Quentin Tarantino movie, but with less humor and thankfully less gratuitous foot fetish moments. But be warned, put down the snacks, pick up the fidget spinners. It is gory and it is intense. Okay, so the Phaeacians are a bit weirded out by Odysseus and they want to know who he is, where he came from, and like why he keeps crying every time they mention the Trojan War. Odysseus is like, oh, fine, it's gonna make me real sad, but I'll tell you. I'm Odysseus, known liar and trickster. Which is a bold opening because if you're honest about being a liar, everyone's thrown off balance. He tells them he's a super hot commodity and 2 sexy women have tried to trap him into marriage. One, the goddess Calypso, and the other, a hot witch named Circe. But they couldn't hold him down because he's got a smoke show of a wife and a sad son at home that he's desperate to get back to. He says that after the Trojan War was done, he was headed home, but Zeus was still pissed at him about the whole wrong sacrifice thing and blew his ship off course. So they ended up going to another island, and they decided to sack the city there and murder all the men and take the women and children as slaves, like as you do. At this point, I'm imagining the Phaeacians are like, yeah, this is why we're xenophobic, to keep psychos like this out. But Odysseus is not done. He and his men hang around celebrating murder a bit too long, and the neighbors of the people they murdered come and kick them out. They're sailing again, but Zeus is still mad, so chucks a typhoon at them, and they get banged around until eventually they wind up at another island. This one is the land of the lotus eaters, where people eat these magical lotuses that make them forget about home or anything else, and they just want to like sit and eat lotuses for the rest of their lives, which I can actually hardcore relate to because the same thing happens to me when I sit down with a bag of caramel popcorn. Been there, guys. No judgment. But anyway, Odysseus is not having it. He's clearly never tried caramel popcorn. And once he finds out what is going on, he grabs the men that have already been entranced by the delicious lotuses and ties them up and chucks them back on the ship and does like a forced rehab while they sail away as fast as they can. Then they come to another island, actually 2 islands, kind of like close to each other with a little bit of water in between, a little strait in between. One island is filled with libertarian cyclopses and the other island with wild goats. They land on the goat island, eat a bunch of the goats, and are just like chilling. And then Odysseus is like, I wonder if the Cyclopses will give us gifts. Let's go find out. So he takes some of his men and one of the ships and sails on over to Cyclops Island. They get there and he's weirdly mad that the Cyclopses don't have like agriculture or a navy so they can go and colonize other people, which like, all right, bro, not everyone's like you. Anyway, he and his men walk along the shore until they find some homes built in caves in the cliffside. They go in and find a sort of home dairy operation, like a low-scale ballerina farm situation. There's a bunch of lambs in pens and crates of cheese and cheese-making equipment. They look through all the guy's stuff and eat some of the guy's cheese and talk about stealing it all and running back to the ship. But Odysseus thinks they can get better gifts if they stay and ask real nice. So they wait, and eventually the owner comes home and they're like, oh, we made a mistake. It is a giant, scary cyclops. So they hide in the back of the cave while the Cyclops brings the mama sheeps back to the lambs and gets everyone settled for the night. Then he rolls a giant boulder in front of the cave entrance as his door, shutting them all in. The boulder is so big that 20 carts couldn't move it, let alone Odysseus and his little soy boys. Anyway, the Cyclops lights a fire and bam, is confronted with a bunch of terrified intruders. He's like, who the hell are you guys? And Odysseus is like, we're the Greeks, headed home from the Trojan War, you know, the one where we sacked the city and killed everyone? That war. Yeah, that was war. So, got any gifts for us? The Cyclops is like, lol, no. And then he reaches out and grabs 2 of Odysseus's men, tears them limb from limb, dashes their brains out, and the brains like spray everywhere, and then he eats them. Flesh, entrails, bone, marrow, and all. Then he lies down and goes to sleep. Odysseus's men are like, we picked the wrong cave, but they can't move the boulder, so they're stuck. Odysseus thinks about killing the Cyclops in his sleep, but then he's like, well, then we just starve to death because we can't move this boulder. So they just hang out. In the morning, the Cyclops looks after his beloved sheep, then grabs 2 more of the men for a quick, healthy breakfast and heads out before putting the boulder back in place, sealing the men in the cave. Odysseus is like, all right, bros, I've got a plan. And grabs this like giant club in the corner. He and his men sharpen it down into a spear thingy, and then they hide it. That night, when the Cyclops gets back, he locks them all in again, takes care of this little sheepies, then eats 2 more of the men for a nice dinner. When he's done, Odysseus is like, hey, I've got some wine that pairs nicely with human. You want to try it? And the Cyclops is like, do I? And drinks it down. Odysseus keeps giving him wine until the Cyclops is sloppy drunk. The Cyclops is like, what's your name anyway? I think I will give you a gift after all. And Odysseus is like, oh, my name is No Man. And the Cyclops is like, cool, nice to meet you, No Man. My gift is that I'm going to eat you last. All right, good night. Then he falls asleep in a puddle of vomited human flesh mixed with like sheep's milk and wine. Gross. Once he's asleep, Odysseus and his men grab the giant spear and shove it in the fire until it's all hot and glowy. And then they just like stab it directly into the Cyclops' eye, twisting it as his eye like bubbles and burns and blood just like pours out everywhere, some like eye gunk and stuff. The Cyclops is screaming for help, and his neighbors come from all the other caves, and they run down, and they're standing outside the door, and they're like, Polyphemus, are you okay, bro? Is someone hurting you? And Polyphemus, the Cyclops, is like, no man is hurting me. And they're like, can you keep it down then? Some of us have work in the morning. Then they all leave. Polyphemus pulls the boulder away, and then he goes and like kind of like squats in the entrance of the cave with his arms out, ready to catch anyone who tries to leave, kind of like a really, really high stakes game of like Red Rover. But Odysseus has other plans. He takes the sheep and ties them together in rows in groups of 3 and ties his men to their undersides. Then he clings to the biggest one, which is Polyphemus's favorite, and he really loves it and like talks to it a lot, so it's a little bit sad. Anyway, when morning comes, the sheep are all like, cool, we need to go to the fields now. Can you let us out for like some breakfast? And the blinded Cyclops lets them out, feeling each one to make sure it's sheep, not human, and then lets them go. He gets the last one that Odysseus is clinging to, and he's like, are you okay, baby? Usually you're the first one out. Is something wrong? Are you feeling okay? Are you sad because that mean no man hurt me? Don't worry, I'll get him back, but thanks for being my special boy. Then he lets him out of the cave. Once they're away from the cave, Odysseus drops down and unties his men, and then they grab the sheep and race for their ship, just doing a little bit of light rustling on their way out. Now, guys, this next part is rage-inducing, so just like prep yourselves. They're rowing back to the Goat Island and the rest of their fleet, and Odysseus is like, I have to tease this guy, and starts yelling back at Polyphemus, trash-talking him, calling him an idiot, and being like, lol, I tricked you, loser. And Polyphemus just starts like hurling boulders towards the sound of his voice, and he nearly sinks the ship. And all of Odysseus' men are like, will you stop, bro? Calm the heck down. This is so unnecessary. But Odysseus can't stop, won't stop. And I kid you not, he gives Polyphemus, he gives this Cyclops man, he gives him his full government name and his real actual home address in Ithaca, and is like, tell everyone I'm the one who blinded you, lol lol. Polyphemus goes all Draco Malfoy and is like, my father will hear of this, and then calls his dad. Guess who this man's dad is? Yep, it's Poseidon, god of the sea. He's all like, Dad, this guy blinded me and stole my beloved sheepies. Can you please make sure all his men dies? And he either like never gets home or takes so long to get home that his house is sort of like ruined and maybe filled with dude bros. I don't know. And his dad's like, bet. Odysseus is like, maybe I overplayed my hand. Yeah, it's probably fine. I'll check a little sacrifice at the problem. So they meet up with the rest of their pals back on Goat Island, and Odysseus sacrifices Polyphemus' favorite special sheep to Zeus, and is like, please make my actions have no consequences. But Zeus is like, hell no, I'm staying out of this one, bro. But he doesn't say it like directly to Odysseus, so Odysseus thinks everything is probably fine. He and his men feast on the stolen sheep, and they set sail the next morning. Crazy behavior, guys. Just full on insane. Anyway, that's the end of the chapter. Tune in next time for a sexy witch who hates men. Is she wrong? Let's find out.